fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
I never chose the canvas that became my prison. It chose me the moment I slipped through the cracked glass of the sunlit atrium. The marble floor beneath my bare feet turned to rough, gritty canvas, the cool scent of linseed oil and aged varnish flooding my nostrils, sharp and intoxicating. I was no longer a child, but a woman whose skin now bore the faint, permanent hue of pigment, each breath leaving a ghostly trail of color on my lips. The world around me was a living painting, an endless sky of impossible blue, cypress trees swaying in a wind I could feel but not hear, a fountain forever frozen in a single splash of turquoise. Time looped in muted brushstrokes, years slipped by without sunrise or sunset, only the steady rhythm of my heart against the canvas walls. The first thing I noticed after the shock faded was the way the light behaved here. It never pierced the clouds, instead it lay flat, a wash of pastel that never shifted. I tried to move, to run, but every step left a faint imprint of my footfall, a darker shade that lingered like a memory. I could feel the texture of the paint under my soles, coarse in some places, slick in others, as if the artist had mixed sand into the medium for effect. My fingers brushed the surface of a nearby stone bench, and the coolness of the marble was replaced by the faint grain of canvas, the fibers whispering against my skin. I called out, my voice a thin echo that seemed to dissolve into the pigment. "Hello," I whispered, half expecting a response from the painted birds perched on a branch that never moved. The birds were frozen mid-song, their feathers a riot of reds and golds, eyes bright with a life that was not theirs. I pressed my palm to one of them, feeling the raised brushstrokes that formed its wing. It was beautiful, but it was also a reminder that everything here was a lie of color, a deception of depth. It was then that I heard a rustle, not of wind, but of a brushstroke being dragged across the canvas. I turned, heart pounding, and saw him tall, dark-haired, his eyes the shade of storm-clouded gray, his skin a warm, earthy tone that seemed to absorb the surrounding light. He stood at the edge of a painted garden, where roses bloomed in impossible shades of violet and amber, their petals catching the static light like tiny lanterns. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low, resonant, as if it were part of the painting itself. There was a hint of amusement in his tone, but also a flicker of something else, concern, perhaps, or curiosity. I swallowed, feeling the paint on my tongue taste metallic. I don't know how I got here. One moment I was in the atrium, the next, I gestured around us, this. He stepped closer, and the ground beneath his feet left a faint trail of darker pigment, a path that seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. "The atrium is a gateway," he explained, his eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for a crack in the illusion. "It was built centuries ago by a guild of artists who believed they could trap the essence of a soul within a masterpiece. They called it the canvas of eternity. Most who entered never return." A shiver ran through me, not from cold, but from the realization that I was now a part of someone else's art. "Why me?" I asked, voice trembling. "Why would they choose a stranger?" He smiled, a small, rueful curve of his lips. "They didn't choose you. The canvas chooses. It senses the color of your spirit, the hue of your longing. It hungered for a shade it had never captured before." I stared at his hand, noticing the faint smudge of vermilion on his fingertips, as if he had just brushed a stroke onto the world. "Who are you?" "Call me Eric," he replied, extending his hand. The moment his skin brushed mine, a jolt of warmth traveled up my arm, and for a heartbeat the canvas seemed to ripple, as if acknowledging the connection. I took his hand, feeling the texture of his palm, smooth, yet speckled with tiny flecks of gold leaf. "Eric," I repeated, the name feeling foreign on my tongue, yet somehow familiar. "What do we do? How do we get out?" He looked toward the horizon, where the painted sky met a distant mountain range that seemed to dissolve into a swirl of indigo and teal. "There is a way," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "At the heart of this painting lies the artist's studio, a place where the brush never rests. If we can reach it, we might find the hand that painted us, and perhaps convince it to release us." My mind raced. The idea of a studio within a painting was absurd, yet the logic of this world demanded that I accept the impossible. And if we can't? Eric's eyes softened. "Then we become part of the canvas forever, living in loops of color and silence. But I would rather spend eternity with you than alone." A blush rose to my cheeks, though there was no heat in this world to make it visible. The thought of sharing this endless, static existence with someone else felt both terrifying and comforting. I felt a strange pull toward him, a magnetic force that seemed to echo the very brushstrokes that bound us. Then let's go, I said, determination settling into my voice. Tell me where to start. He turned, leading me down a path lined with towering cypress trees. Their trunks were rendered in thick impasto strokes, each bark ridge a swirl of dark green and charcoal. The wind that moved through them was silent, but I could feel its pressure against my cheek, a phantom caress that made my eyes water. As we walked, Eric spoke of the history of the canvas. The guild that created this place believed that art could capture the soul's essence. They thought that by imprisoning a spirit within a masterpiece, they could preserve it forever, but they underestimated the power of longing. The canvas feeds on desire, on the yearning to be seen, to be understood. That's why it chose you and why it chose me. I listened, the words painting pictures in my mind. I imagined a dimly lit workshop, brushes dripping with midnight ink, the scent of turpentine thick in the air. I could almost hear the soft scrape of a palette knife against wood. "Do you think the artist is still here?" I asked, curiosity edging my voice. Eric paused, his gaze drifting to a painted river that flowed in a single, frozen cascade of sapphire. "The artist may be long gone, but their presence lingers. Every brushstroke is a heartbeat, every color a breath. If we find the studio, we might find a way to speak to that lingering echo." We reached a clearing where a marble statue stood, its form half-finished, a marble torso with a missing arm, as if the sculptor had abandoned it mid-creation. The statue's eyes were hollow, yet they seemed to follow us. I felt a pang of sadness for the unfinished work, a reminder that even in this world, things could be left incomplete. Eric placed his hand on the statue's chest, and the stone seemed to pulse, a faint glow emanating from within. "The studio is not far," he murmured, "but the path is guarded by the painter's guardians, creatures born of pigment and will. We must be careful." I tightened my grip on his arm, feeling the faint thrum of his pulse through the canvas. "What do they look like?" He smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "Imagine a wolf made of oil, its fur a swirl of midnight blues and bruised purples, eyes like molten gold, or a hawk whose feathers are shards of glass, reflecting the sky in 1,000 fragments. They are beautiful but deadly." We moved forward, the ground beneath us shifting from smooth canvas to a texture that resembled thick oil paint, each step leaving a small pool of color that quickly dried into a glossy sheen. The air grew heavier, the scent of linseed oil more pungent, as if the very atmosphere was thickening. Suddenly, a low growl resonated from the shadows. A wolf emerged, its form shimmering, the brushstrokes that formed its body constantly shifting, as if the creature were being repainted in real time. Its eyes locked onto us, amber and unblinking. "Stay close," Eric whispered, his hand finding mine again. He raised his own hand, and a thin line of bright crimson appeared, a slash of color that seemed to pulse with his intent. The wolf lunged, its movement fluid, the paint rippling like liquid mercury. I felt a surge of adrenaline, though there was no wind to carry it. I stepped to the side, the wolf's massive paw missing me by inches, leaving a dark smudge on the canvas floor. Eric's crimson line shot forward, striking the wolf's flank. The impact caused a burst of color, scarlet, orange, and gold, splattering across the creature's form. The wolf recoiled, its outline flickering, as if the paint that defined it was being erased. "We have to keep moving," Eric said, his voice urgent. "The Guardians will call for reinforcements if we linger." We sprinted toward a narrow archway framed by vines of deep violet, the vines themselves appearing as thick, looping strokes of paint. As we passed through, the world seemed to shift. The sky darkened to a richer indigo, and the air grew cooler, carrying a faint scent of wet earth and fresh pine. Beyond the arch, we entered a corridor lined with towering easels, each holding a half-finished masterpiece. Some depicted serene landscapes, others chaotic battles, all frozen in a state of perpetual creation. The light here was softer, a diffused glow that seemed to emanate from the very walls. "This is the Hall of Unfinished Dreams," Eric whispered, reverence in his tone. "Each of these works holds a soul that never found release." I walked past a painting of a moonlit sea, the waves rendered in delicate blues that seemed to move if I stared long enough. A faint whisper rose from it, a voice I could not quite make out, like a memory of a lullaby. "Do you hear that?" I asked, my breath catching. Eric nodded. "It's the echo of those trapped. Their longing seeps into the canvas, forming a chorus of yearning." We continued until we reached a massive door, its surface a tapestry of swirling colors, each hue blending into the next like a living rainbow. The door pulsed gently, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. The artist's studio, Eric said, his hand hovering over the wood. Beyond this, we may find the brush that holds us. I placed my palm against the door, feeling the coolness of the paint beneath my skin. A surge of warmth spread through me, and the door swung open with a soft sigh, revealing a vast space bathed in golden light. The studio was unlike any place I could have imagined. Canvases stretched from floor to ceiling, each one alive with movement, flowers blooming and wilting in seconds, clouds swirling in endless cycles. In the center stood a massive wooden table, scattered with brushes of every size, their bristles dripping with colors that seemed to glow from within. At the far end, a figure hunched over a canvas, its back turned to us. The figure was draped in a cloak of midnight, the fabric woven from threads of shadow and starlight. As the figure turned, I saw a face both ageless and youthful, eyes deep pools of midnight ink. "Welcome," the voice said, resonant and warm, echoing through the studio. "I have been expecting you." Eric stepped forward, his posture confident. "We seek release. The canvas has held us too long." The artist, no, the creator, lifted a hand, and a brush floated gently to their fingertips. "You are not prisoners," they said, a smile playing on their lips. "You are part of the masterpiece." I felt a knot tighten in my chest. Part of the masterpiece, then why does it feel like a cage? The creator's eyes softened. "Because you have not yet understood the purpose of art. It is not merely to capture, but to transform. Your souls were chosen because they possess a color no brush has ever held. Together, you can become the hue that completes the canvas." Eric looked at me, his gaze intense. "What does that mean for us?" The creator gestured toward the empty canvas on the easel beside them. "Step forward, place your hands upon the surface. Let your longing flow into the paint. Together, you will create a new shade, a color that will free you and enrich the world beyond these walls." My heart hammered, but I felt a strange calm settle over me. I reached for the canvas, the texture of the linen cool against my fingertips. Eric placed his hand beside mine, his skin warm, his pulse matching mine. We closed our eyes, and I let the memories of the atrium, the endless sky, the frozen fountain, and the whispering guardians flood my mind. I thought of the longing that had driven me here, the desire to be seen, to be understood, to find a place where my colors mattered. Eric's thoughts intertwined with mine. He remembered his own longing, a yearning to break free from the confines of his own painted existence, to feel the wind on his face, to hear a voice that was not his own. As our thoughts merged, a soft glow began to emanate from our joined hands. The paint on the canvas stirred, swirling like a vortex of light. Shades of crimson, sapphire, emerald, and gold blended, creating a hue that seemed to pulse with life. The creator watched, eyes shining with approval. "You have done it. You have become the bridge between worlds." The canvas erupted in a burst of color, a wave that washed over the studio, over the walls, over the very floor. I felt the paint lift from my skin, the pigment that had become part of me dissolving into the air like mist. When the light dimmed, I opened my eyes to find myself standing in the sunlit atrium once more. The cracked glass above me glittered with sunlight, the marble floor gleaming under my bare feet. The scent of linseed oil was gone, replaced by the fresh aroma of blooming flowers from the garden outside. Eric stood beside me, his hands still warm in mine. He looked different now, no longer a figure of paint, but a man of flesh and breath. His eyes held the same stormy gray, but now they reflected the real world. "We are free," he whispered, a smile spreading across his face. I laughed, a sound that rang clear and true. "Free," I echoed, feeling the weight of centuries lift from my shoulders. We stepped out of the atrium together, the doors opening onto a courtyard filled with real trees, birds singing, and a sky that truly rose and set. The world beyond the canvas was alive, vibrant, and waiting. As we walked, I glanced back at the atrium, the cracked glass now a portal that shimmered faintly, as if acknowledging our departure. I felt a gratitude swell within me, not just for my own release, but for the bond forged in the heart of a painted prison. Eric squeezed my hand. "We have a new canvas now," he said, his voice full of promise. I turned to him, my heart beating in rhythm with his, and this time we choose the colors ourselves. Together we stepped into the sunrise, the world stretching before us like a blank page, waiting for the story we would paint with our lives.